The chandeliers glowed like stars. Waiters moved silently between people dressed in tuxedos and flowing gowns. Near the front of the grand auction hall, the guests buzzed with quiet anticipation. Among them, David Cole walked carefully, awkward in a slightly wrinkled rented tuxedo, holding the hand of his daughter, Leela. Her eyes lit up. "Daddy, this place looks like a palace," she whispered. David smiled. "Let's try not to touch anything gold." A server approached, eyes narrowing as he glanced at the invitation in David's hand. "May I help you find your seat, sir?" David held the card out without a word. The server scanned it, hesitated, then gestured toward a table near the front. A few guests already seated turned discreetly to look. One raised an eyebrow. Another whispered something behind a half-filled glass. David led Leela to their seats with quiet dignity. Around them, whispers crept like smoke. At the adjacent VIP table sat Clara Eisenberg in a deep crimson gown, silver necklace shining against her collarbone. She leaned toward her friend, speaking in German. "Look at him, poor man. He doesn't belong here, probably borrowed that suit." Laughter, quiet but cruel, circled the table like a secret handshake. David said nothing. He flipped through the auction catalog, trying not to notice. Clara's voice was easy, careless. "These charity functions are starting to feel like theater. I suppose we need peasants at the ball." Her friend snorted into his champagne. Leela, unaware of the context but sensitive to tones, stared at the necklace around Clara's neck. The engraving caught the light. "Your necklace is pretty," she said politely. "What does it say?" Clara smiled at the girl, then turned to her friend again in German. "Even if I told her, she wouldn't understand. These people never do." David looked up slowly. His voice was calm. "I understood every word you said." Clara froze. Her glass slipped from her hand and shattered at her feet. Laughter stopped. Forks paused midair. David looked her in the eye, unshaken. The guests stared. A few shifted, uncomfortable. Others watched with interest. David continued flipping through the catalog. Leela leaned closer to him and whispered, "What's she mean?" "She doesn't know how to speak kindly," he murmured back. 3 years ago, this tux had belonged to someone else. He'd worn overalls then, fixing cars and teaching Leela how to say good night in German. He never cared about auctions. His wife, Anna, had. She had made notebooks glow with 2 languages, folding love letters between grammar drills and poetry lines. When the cancer came, she held his hand and said, "Promise me you'll teach her both languages. Let her speak with both sides of her heart." Now her notebook sat in his inner pocket, dog-eared, treasured, and full of dictionary entries written in handwriting still too familiar. Earlier that day, as they walked toward the venue, Leela had stopped by the entrance gate. Something glinted in the gravel. She picked it up, an old German coin, weathered but intact. "It's my lucky coin," she had declared. "Mama would say it's a good sign." And so they had walked inside. At the Eisenberg table, tension had congealed into something heavier. Clara looked straight ahead, flushed and silent. People tried not to stare but failed. A gentleman seated behind whispered, "Perhaps he plans to bid on the leftover items. Something affordable, surely." Someone chuckled. On the live feed, a comment scrolled across the screen. "Single dad cosplaying a millionaire. Painful to watch." At the table, the snickering resumed. Clara regained her composure, leaned in again, speaking in German under her breath. Let's see how long before they politely ask him to move. These events attract the ambitious types. Bit embarrassing. One of her friends added, "At least his daughter is quiet. Sad situation, though." David ran his thumb along the edge of the notebook still tucked in his jacket. He stayed silent, but Leela's eyes flicked to his. She could sense it. Something wasn't right. She reached into her palm and squeezed the coin. David exhaled once. Then he slowly reached into his coat, pulled out the notebook and placed it on the table. Worn leather, scuffed edges, it looked ordinary except that it was. He looked up at Clara. "You mistake money for class," he said in crisp, near-perfect German. "True class is how you treat people when you think no one is watching." Every sound in the hall seemed to vanish. Someone gasped. A fork clanged against a plate. He looked around the table. "You assumed I couldn't understand. But my wife, your former teacher, apparently, taught me that language isn't just understanding words. It's understanding people." Clara tilted her head. "Excuse me." A reporter nearby, drawn by the shift in the room, approached with a camera phone already recording. "Could you tell us your name, sir? Are you one of the donors?" David didn't answer the camera. He turned to Clara again, gestured to the necklace. "That quote on your necklace, that is gold. It's Hein. A mistake someone truly educated wouldn't make." Whispers broke out. At nearby tables, guests pulled out their phones. His voice stayed calm. "Gold didn't say that, but Hein did look it up." Clara blinked rapidly. Someone at her table confirmed it in a hushed voice. Clara opened her mouth, searching for damage control. Anyone can memorize a few lines, it doesn't mean. David opened the notebook. "My wife was Anna Weber. Before she became Anna Cole, she wrote this." He turned the pages, vocab charts, personal notes, quotes underlined, commentaries in both English and German. She spent 10 years teaching language, so students could understand both grammar and grace. A silence fell again. "She gave this to me right before she died, and asked me to help our daughter keep both parts of her mother's world alive." He ran his fingers over a page where Anna had written a quote, "Sprach ist der Schlüssel zur Seele." Language is the key to the soul. Across the table, Clara's hands were clenched in her lap. Her necklace glinted faintly, suddenly heavy. In the back, a reporter whispered to a technician, "Clip that. Viral in 10, trust me." Leela looked up at her dad, then at Clara, then back down at the coin in her palm. It shimmered again. Someone commented on the stream. "This man is teaching a room how to speak, without raising his voice." David didn't move. He quietly slipped the notebook back into his coat pocket. Across the room, respect began to shift, from pearls and cufflinks to something else entirely. A name echoed, now around the edges of the hall. Anna Weber's. Respect had changed direction, and the night was still young. The auction hall resumed movement, but the atmosphere had changed. Where there was once polite superiority, now there was silence, uncertainty. Clara Eisenberg sat stone still, fingers lightly grazing the silver necklace at her throat, as if trying to remember what it meant, or why she wore it at all. David was quiet now, the fire in him receding, but not gone. It hadn't been anger in his voice, just truth, delivered with the sharpness of someone who spent years learning how to endure without bending. Leela leaned her head against his arm, coin clutched tightly between her fingers like armor. Clara broke her silence at last, still speaking in English, her voice subdued. "Anna Weber," she said slowly. "She taught at Berlin International." David nodded once. "From 2010 to 2015. Then we moved. Layla was just a baby." Clara's lips parted slightly, like air had left her lungs. "She gave me this necklace, graduation day. She told me the quote meant that nobility wasn't about how you speak, but how you listen." "She said that," David replied softly. "Often, but what she engraved was Goth. It was Hein. She wanted the people who read it to understand, and the people who wore it to really think about what they were showing the world." Clara bowed her head. Behind them, the auction rolled on. A vintage violin sold for $90,000. A scholarship package to a prep school in Geneva went for $120,000. Applause filtered in waves. But at David and Leela's table, no one watched the bidding. "I wore that necklace to make myself look thoughtful," Clara admitted. "Educated, cultured." David didn't respond immediately. He pulled out the worn leather notebook again, half showing it, but not to boast. simply cradling it the way some people hold baby shoes from a child who's outgrown them. She never made anyone feel stupid, Clara added without being asked. Even when I confused authors or spoke too fast, she'd just smile and correct me with grace. There's a note she once wrote at the back of my final paper. It said, "Arrogance grows where curiosity ends, and you are still curious. Stay that way." "You didn't believe her," David said. "I wanted to, then life made it too easy not to." A server timidly approached, interrupting. "Excuse me, sir. Ma'am, you're both requested to remain until the final segment. The charity has a special tribute prepared." David looked at him blankly. "We didn't donate anything," he said. The server hesitated. "Actually, it's regarding an artwork." Clara blinked. "Artwork." The lights dimmed then, and soft music filled the air. On the screen above the stage, a new image flickered to life, a painting. A vineyard-lined path beside a winding river, faint mist lifting over distant hills, quiet, earthy colors full of memory. The auctioneer spoke with reverence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we present the centerpiece of tonight's gala, Heimat am Rhein," painted in 2018 by the late Anna Weber-Cole, a teacher, painter, and language scholar whose work transcended borders. David was frozen, his mouth opened slightly. The name echoed off the walls of his comprehension. His eyes traveled back to the canvas, now spotlit above the stage. "This piece," continued the auctioneer, "was her final completed painting before she passed away. It has been donated anonymously by her family, with proceeds going entirely to international literacy and language programs." Clara turned, her expression shifting from shame to incredulity. "You didn't know?" David shook his head. "I didn't submit it. I didn't even know it had left our apartment." Leela looked up. "It was in the old box, Daddy, the one you gave your friend from the garage for safekeeping." "You told him to use it for something important," Clara reminded him gently. "Maybe he thought this was the way." On stage, bidding had already begun. $50,000, $75,000, $95,000. David stared at the painting, unable to move. Hands raised in the crowd. The number climbed past $120,000. Leela's voice broke through the noise. "That's Mama's river," she whispered, "from the coin." David leaned down. "What do you mean?" She held up the old coin again. Under the lights, the engraved border was unmistakable, rows of carved hills beside a river bend. The same shape, the same rhythm, captured flawlessly in Anna's brushwork. "She painted home," Leela whispered, "even though she couldn't go back." David's eyes burned. Clara watched him wordlessly, then turned toward the stage. She hesitated, brought her hand to her necklace. As the bidding reached $200,000, David, almost without realizing it, raised his paddle. Gasps, audible shock, glaring eyes. Then ridicule. The chat on the live stream blew up once more. "What is he doing? Is this for real? Dear God, someone stop him. He's embarrassing himself." Clara's fingers moved swiftly under the table. She opened her phone, eyes scanning the bidder list. But before she could act, the auctioneer raised one hand for silence. "Before moving forward, we are required to disclose this painting was already gifted to the organization by its legal owners, the late artist's family, namely, Mr. David Cole and his daughter, Leela." A hush swept the room, voices cut off mid-laugh. The auctioneer paused again. "This painting was never for sale, but we thank you for honoring it with your attention and your respect." The camera swung back to David and Leela. Silence, then applause. But Clara wasn't clapping. Her eyes were wet. She stood, and the necklace around her neck, Anna's necklace, felt impossibly heavy. She took it off. Kneeling beside Leela, she placed it gently in the girl's hand. "This was a graduation gift," Clara said quietly, "but it doesn't belong to me anymore." Leela looked to her father. He nodded. Clara continued, voice steady but raw. Your mother gave me this because she believed I could learn to speak with not just words, but with heart. Tonight, I forgot that. I think you remembered better than I ever did. Leela looked at the silver necklace, then at her coin, then at the silent room now breathing only the echo of grace. She said gifts should travel, Leela whispered, to people who need them most. The room held its breath. David looked up at the spotlighted painting, then down at the notebook in his hand. Thousands of words handwritten by the one voice he missed more than anything. And deep in the heart of that crowded room, something shifted, something old and familiar. Respect. A soft hum swept through the auction hall, not conversation, not applause, something heavier, more reverent. The kind of silence that holds 100 unsaid things. The painting still shone under the gallery lights, the hills of the Rhine bathed in warm amber, as if painted from memory rather than sight. For David Cole, it was like seeing his wife alive again, expressing in oil and brush what she used to say with words at bedtime, in kitchens, across dog-eared pages. She had painted not just a landscape, but a legacy. The silver necklace now hung around Leela's neck. It seemed somehow less ornamental there, less performative. It nestled below her collar like a medal of honor, rehomed, relevant. She held the lucky coin between her fingers and looked up at Clara, unsure of what to say. Clara remained kneeling beside her. The weight of the night had begun to settle behind her eyes, breaking through the practiced poise of countless galas, interviews, and sponsored dinners. All Anna's words, the lessons she'd forgotten, were returning one by one, carried by the voice of a child who didn't speak in riddles or reputation. I wore that necklace to remember where I came from, Clara said. But I stopped thinking about what it meant to get there, how much help I had. Leela tilted her head. Mama helped you. Yes, Clara whispered. She helped me become the person I always pretended to be. She stood slowly and turned to David. I owe you both the truth, but I owe Anna more. David nodded but said nothing. A man from the far side of the room approached, older, dignified, dressed simply but with presence. He carried a small notepad and an antique fountain pen. Excuse me, he said. Dr. Emil Hart. I represent the German Cultural Heritage Council. Your wife, Anna Weber. She contributed to a literature curriculum that was adopted across 12 regional districts. When we heard her painting might appear tonight under her married name, we sent someone to verify. And, well, here we are. David's eyebrows lifted. I had no idea. The man smiled gently. Few educators know the full impact of their ripples. He turned to Clara. The Weber Trust funded your graduate year, did it not? Clara blinked. That, yes, I mentioned it in an old bio. I thought it was something abstract. I didn't know it was real people. It was Anna's family, David said. She didn't talk much about their money, only their mission. Dr. Hart stepped forward. We were hoping, if we could locate her family, to honor her posthumously with the Order of Cultural Merit in Berlin. His voice lowered. And perhaps return some of her unreleased materials to public record. David gently retrieved the notebook from his coat. There's more here than people realize. Notes, essays, her own curriculum ideas. Clara watched in silence as David opened to one of the final entries. Between the lines of German poetry and classroom notes was a small, faded photo, Anna surrounded by students. Clara among them, unmistakably younger, already wearing the same silver necklace. Beneath the image, Anna's handwriting curled in precise script. My brightest students often carry the hardest lessons. Clara still confuses confidence with compassion, but I believe she'll find her way. She just needs to remember why she began trying in the first place. The words hit Clara like a whisper from a ghost, loving, honest, and unflinchingly hopeful. I was already everything I shouldn't have been, Clara whispered, closing her eyes. And she still believed in me. David looked at the photo, then at Clara. She didn't believe in who you were, he said gently. She believed in who you could become. The room around them shifted again, soft murmurs, subtle nods. News of the moment spread like steam on glass. The auction no longer felt like a luxury gathering. It felt like a eulogy, or maybe a homecoming. "What happens now?" Clara asked. Dr. Hart smiled. "We begin again, this time with focus." He turned to David once more. "We would also like to feature Anna's notebook, sections of it, in an upcoming exhibit. Alongside her painting, if you agree, of course." David considered this for only a breath. "She believed knowledge belonged to everyone," he said. "As long as her words stay open to others, she'll always be teaching." A ripple of soft applause broke out nearby. Someone, a guest who had been eavesdropping, stepped forward, placing a business card on the table. "I studied with one of her textbooks," she said. "Please let me know how I can help." Another guest chimed in. "I was taught German using her verb stories, Anna Weber's Wolf Tales. I still remember Der kleine Wolf will tanzen." David smiled. She used to read that one to Leela every Thursday night. More murmurs, more stories. Each one like a thread stitching strangers together. A woman with red-rimmed eyes came forward, holding her phone tightly. "I'm a refugee from Aleppo. Your wife's language guides helped me learn German. I got work in Dresden because of her writing." Leela took a step closer. "You knew Mama's words." The woman kneels. "Yes, sweet girl, her words changed my life." Leela beamed, holding the silver necklace. "She always said words were like lights, that when people feel lost, they only need someone to speak a little light toward them." Tears sprang into the woman's eyes. Dr. Hart looked to Clara. "Germany will honor Anna, but what will your foundation do?" Clara looked up. Her voice cracked but was firm. "The Eisenberg Foundation," she said slowly, "will establish the Anna Weber Memorial Language Initiative, a scholarship for immigrant families and displaced children, everywhere our programs operate." A murmur of approval circled the room. David tilted his head. "That's a start." "It's not charity," Clara added. "It's continuity, it's correcting what I forgot. Anna didn't just teach conjugation, she taught conscience." "Make it more than a program," David said. "Make it a promise." Clara extended her hand, then withdrew it briefly before trying again. "I want you both to help write the program, David and Leela. Its mission should come from Anna's values, not my guilt." David took her hand, but shook gently once. "Anna never believed guilt builds anything good, but shared purpose, that works." Leela looked up. "Can I help too?" Clara knelt beside her again. "You already have." They sat in silence for a moment, the painting still glowing overhead. Suddenly, Leela's voice rose again. "Wait." Everyone froze. She rummaged through her small evening purse, pulled out the coin, squinted at it under the table light. She held it up to the painting, comparing it carefully. The river and the hill, they match Mama's picture. David and Clara leaned in, and there it was, undeniable. The same curve of the Rhine, the same slope of ancient vineyards etched into the coin. "She painted what was on this," Leela declared, triumphant. "That coin's over 100 years old," Dr. Hart observed. "From the Weber family's region in the Rhineland, that crest. It's the Weber seal woven into educational documents and even marked on certain first edition readers." David stared at it. "So Anna, she didn't just paint a landscape, she painted home, the place her family came from." "And now Leela holds both the place," Clara added, "and the promise." The hush came again, not silence, something deeper than that, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. By the time the auction concluded, donors were writing checks not for tax breaks, but for transformation. Across the room, servers had gone quiet, guests stopped pretending to be above the story. And the center of it remained, one artwork, one coin, one notebook, and a silver necklace passed from teacher to student to child, until it found its rightful place again. David closed the notebook and took a long breath. He had come to an event he never wanted to attend. But somehow, through disbelief and dismissal, Anna had still been teaching through Paige's memory and the hearts she'd touched long before tonight. A month later, a gentle breeze stirred the autumn leaves outside the Berlin Museum of Cultural Heritage. The crowd gathered outside the glass-paneled gallery wasn't just art patrons or education dignitaries. It was families, former students, journalists, and dozens of people who had never met Anna Weber, yet carried pieces of her in their lives. Inside, the lighting had been softened, focused. Along the longest wall hung Anna's final painting, Heimat am Rhein, framed in understated oak. Beneath it, a black plaque read simply, "In memory of Anna Weber Kohl, teacher, artist, bridge builder." Below that, her words continue to connect hearts across cultures. Behind a custom glass case stood the leather notebook. Pages spread open to show her handwriting. Exercises, annotations, notes to her students, and small line drawings of places she'd loved. River curves, towers, ivy-covered schools. David Cole stood quietly beside the display, dressed in a plain black suit. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders a touch stiff. He wore no tie, no ornament, just the air of someone determined to let silence speak. At his side, Leela, wearing a pale blue dress, stood as still as she could manage, though her eyes darted from display to crowd to the bright red medal one of the curators held in a velvet box. The Order of Cultural Merit, awarded posthumously. David didn't say a word. His fingers gently tapped against the side of his leg. Every few seconds, his other hand moved, instinctively checking the outline of Anna's old notebook, except it wasn't on him anymore. It was here in the museum, shared now. Clara Eisenberg arrived without fanfare. No designer gown, no press entourage. A muted gray dress, her hair let down simply. She walked with confident humility. In her arms she carried a book, leather-bound, embossed with silver. The first printed copy of the Anna Weber Memorial Scholarship Handbook. "We've already received over 2,000 applications," she said softly as she approached David. "Some from Syria, others from Ukraine, Ghana, Myanmar, and a boy in Seoul who reads German lullabies to his baby sister because they help her sleep." David nodded, but his eyes remained on the display. "She'd like that," he said, "not just the numbers, the why." "She's not the one who launched this, though," Clara said. "You are." "No," he replied. "Anna taught me how. I just didn't realize I was in training for this." They stood in silence for a few moments until Leela tugged Clara's sleeve. "I wear Mama's necklace every day now," she said proudly. "But my friends at school don't know the writing. I told them it's secret." Clara chuckled. "It's not a secret, it's just a code, one for people who speak kindness." "I want to learn more," Leela said. "Not just German, but all of it, the stories, the quotes, the smart stuff Mama loved." Clara knelt so they were eye to eye. "Then we'll write them down together. We'll build a book. Leela Cole's Big Bridge Book." David raised an eyebrow, not the snappiest title. "It's a working draft," Clara shot back, smiling. They moved into the main gallery. A quiet had taken hold, the kind born not from silence but from presence. Volunteers guided guests through the installation. There was a screen showing excerpts from Anna's classroom lectures, clips from old teacher training sessions, a photograph of her standing on a bridge in Heidelberg, a video of her reading Go the Loud while Leela, maybe 4 years old at the time, tried to copy her cadence. Near the back wall, a final viewing room had been arranged. On its central screen played a compilation video. Voices from across the world, people sharing how Anna's work touched their lives. First, a woman speaking Pashto explained how Anna's translated readers had helped her teach her daughter German after resettling in Cologne. Then a quiet South Korean teenager from Busan, smiling shyly, holding up a note card with Dank Anna, scrawled in felt tip. Another clip, a refugee teacher in Warsaw. She made language less like a weapon of the state and more like an open door. David's jaw tightened. His eyes misted. Not from sadness, but from something closer to awe. He never knew how wide her words had traveled. At the end of the compilation, a voice behind the lens asked a young child, probably 6 or 7, "Who is Anna Weber to you?" The child smiled and said, "She's someone who helps people who feel far away feel closer." A soft tear slid down David's cheek. Clara stood beside him, tissue quietly offered. He accepted, nodded. Later, during the formal ceremony, Clara stood on stage, not as a sponsor, but as a student. "I wore Anna Weber's necklace for years," she said into the microphone. "But not until that night at the auction did I understand what it meant. I used her gift to pretend I knew more than others, but her greatest lesson wasn't about language. It was about listening with grace." She turned slightly toward David and Leela, who now sat in the front row. "This family taught me something I'd forgotten. Dignity doesn't require designer dresses. Wisdom doesn't need chandeliers. And conversations matter most when we speak, not to impress, but to understand." She paused. "This isn't just about preserving one woman's work. It's about spreading her purpose." Applause followed, real applause. Not the polite kind. Outside the spotlight, Leela toyed with her lucky coin, now strung next to the silver necklace. She stared up at the painting mounted in lights, the same one that stole the room's breath back at the gala. After the event, in a quiet corner of the museum courtyard, Clara approached David privately. "I wanted you to have this," she said, handing him a sealed envelope. Inside was an original handwritten letter from Anna, addressed, surprisingly, to Clara. "It was folded inside the back cover of one of her books," Clara explained. "I must have overlooked it all these years." David slowly unfolded the page. Anna's script was unmistakable. "Clara, you have a mind built for frameworks and ideas, but it's your heart I hope you grow into. The world will reward you quickly for knowing things, but kindness is quieter, and it waits longer. Cultivate both, and you'll be unstoppable. With love, Anna." David folded it gently again. White lines at the corners of the paper showed where time had tugged. "She really did believe in you even then," he said. Clara nodded. "I should have believed in her more." Leela piped in matter-of-factly. "Mama said believing in someone is like planting flowers. You water them with time." They both chuckled. Clara knelt again, holding her hands out to Leela. "Tell me more about your mama." Leela looked thoughtful. She used stories to explain rules, like verbs are like people. They sometimes go away, but someone is always coming after them. Another pause, then she added, "She said the best people talk like translators. They try to say things you can understand." Clara smiled through tears. "Then I have a lot to relearn." "No," David corrected gently. "You already started." Inside the museum, the notebook lay behind glass. But its words lived louder than ever. Sunlight streamed through tall museum windows as a small group gathered for the education program's official unveiling. No velvet rope, no tuxedos, just young voices, different accents, different shoes, same notebook copies in their hands, the first batch of the Anna Weber Memorial Language Curriculum. At the center sat Leela, silver necklace above her collar, old German coin hanging beside it. She looked calm, focused, older somehow. David stood at the back, unnoticed, exactly as he liked, watching her speak for the first time as something more than a student, as a representative of her mother's legacy. "I don't remember everything about my mom," Leela said, voice steady. "But I remember her books, and how she made funny voices during stories, and how she said speaking someone's language means more than words, it means you're trying to make them feel safe." A pause. "I think that's what this whole thing is about, making people feel that they belong." A little boy clapped too early, others followed. Behind them all stood Clara, arms crossed tight, not out of tension, but pride. She de-stepped back from day-to-day operations of the foundation. Now she helped facilitate, not lead. When someone asked her what made her change, all she ever said was, "A mirror, a notebook, a child." After the event, Leela joined her father outside. "Mama would like today," she said, swinging her coin. David crouched beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. "She'd love it," he said, "especially the speech." "Was I good?" "You were the bridge." They sat on the warm stone steps, wrapped in quiet. From his coat pocket, David pulled a final page, a photocopy of the very last entry in Anna's notebook. Her handwriting, slanted, unmistakable, written weeks before she passed. Language is love made visible. When we speak in someone's voice, when we learn their words, we are saying, "I see you, I value you, you matter." Leela leaned her head on his arm. "Let's write more," she said softly. David looked at the sky for a long time, then nodded. And everything Anna had built, in sentences, in sketches, in seeds planted long ago, continued, one word at a time.